Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Deceived Husbands for more stories.
When the doorbell rang, we'd just finished dinner. My 16-year-old daughter, Emily, jumped up to answer it before either I or her brother could. She quickly returned with a puzzled look on her face. "Dad, it's a policeman. He wants to talk to you," she said. A jolt of fear shot through me, but I tried to hide it. I went to the door and saw that it was actually a California state trooper. "Are you Michael Hayes?" the trooper asked. Yes, I confirmed. "Are you the husband of Sarah Hayes?" When I nodded, the trooper looked at my two kids and said, "May I speak with you in private, Mr. Walker?" My throat constricted, and I had to clear it before I could speak. "Ethan, Emily, please go to your rooms. I need to speak with the officer alone." They began to protest, but when I barked now, they jumped and hurried to their rooms. They weren't used to hearing that tone from me. Once they were gone, the officer turned back to me. "Mr. Walker, I've been asked to give you some bad news. Your wife's airplane is missing and presumed down. It dropped off the radar tonight approximately halfway between Los Angeles Airport and the Jamaica. A Coast Guard ship is in the area now looking for survivors." The facts were straightforward enough. In her role as a regional sales VP for a major multinational corporation, Rachel had set out to visit their Caribbean headquarters in Kingston, accompanied by the region's chief financial officer. She was an experienced small plane pilot, so the flight to the Jamaica should have been routine. I hadn't thought much of it when Rachel called to let me know her plans. Now, I was distraught. This had to be my worst nightmare. My wife's plane had crashed at night in the shark-infested waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The officer provided a few additional details that did nothing to give me any encouragement before he left, promising that the Coast Guard would call with updates in the morning or earlier if there was any news. No sooner had the door closed behind the trooper than both Ethan and Emily came running to my side. Anxiety written on their faces, asking questions I couldn't answer. I knew they had been listening. I would have eavesdropped too if I'd been in their shoes. The three of us clung to each other, each trying to find encouraging things to say to the others. Emily began to cry, and although he was trying to be brave, Ethan's eyes were red as well. I did my best to keep it together for their sake, but inside, I was frantic. There was no thought of cleaning the dishes or doing homework. Our anguish kept us within arm's length of each other for the rest of the evening. It grew past their normal bedtime, but still, no phone call came. Finally, exhausted by the lateness of the hour and our fears, all three of us gravitated to the master bedroom, and the kids slept with me for the first time since they were little and afraid of thunderstorms. We were up and trying to eat breakfast the next morning when a representative from the Coast Guard called. The slim hope stirred by the call was quickly dashed when the officer told me that the cutters searching the area had found nothing. I called the principal at the middle school the kids attended to let her know why Ethan and Emily would be absent that day. Then I went to check on them, only to find them in front of the television, watching a report on the missing plane on CNN. I wasn't sure whether to let them keep watching or turn the set off, but before I could reach a decision, the phone began to ring again. From that point on, whenever I hung up from one call, another would come in. The first calls were from Rachel's parents and my own, all frantic with worry, while trying to project a false optimism that she would miraculously be found. I promised to call back immediately with any news. Next came the calls from our friends and Rachel's colleagues. All wanted to say or do something to help, but none of them had any idea how. The conversations were short and awkward. Most difficult of all were the calls from the media. I should have expected those, but I was caught off guard when the first reporter called, and I talked to the reporter from the Times much longer than I wanted. Then representatives from other media began calling, and when I realized what was happening, I began screening all the calls, returning only those from people I cared about. During all this, neighbors and friends started coming by with condolences and food. At first, their generosity was appreciated because I had no energy for preparing meals. But soon, we had more food than we could hope to eat in a week. It was an old tradition to express concern and condolences with food, but while I appreciated the gesture, every roast and casserole was a bitter reminder that my wife of 16 years was almost certainly dead. The next few days were horrible. We were virtual prisoners in our own home, kept there by our desire not to deal with other people and by our hope for some news from the Coast Guard. I made daily calls to the office in Newark for updates, but the reports were always negative. Then, 3 days after the trooper had arrived at our doorstep, came the news we'd been dreading. A Coast Guard officer called to tell me that wreckage from Rachel's plane had been found. There were no signs of any survivors. "I'm sorry, sir," the officer concluded, "but we're going to have to suspend search and rescue operations at this time." I wanted nothing more than to hide away and mourn in solitude, but that option wasn't available. Instead, I faced a seemingly endless list of painful responsibilities. The worst, of course, was having to tell Ethan and Emily the sad news and trying to console them. When they finally calmed down, I had to phone relatives and close friends to let them know. Next was a call to our church to arrange a memorial service, followed by one to the newspaper to submit an obituary. Then came more calls to share the time and date of the service. By the time I was done, I felt physically and emotionally exhausted. Somehow, we made it through the service and began the slow, painful process of trying to resume a normal life. The following week, the kids returned to school, and the resumption of their routine seemed to help a little. I was not so fortunate. A whole new set of duties fell on my shoulders. At the urging of a friend, I contacted an attorney to find out what my legal responsibilities were. I was shocked to learn that I would have to petition for a death certificate. But her plane crashed at sea, I protested. How can there be any doubt? I know, the attorney commiserated, but in the absence of a body and a physician's certificate, the court must make a formal declaration. Am I going to have to wait 7 years? I asked in distress. No, the attorney assured me. In a case like this, where an individual has been lost at sea, there's usually no significant delay. You may have to answer some questions, but typically such cases are resolved very quickly. I can get the petition started for you, he went on. I can also help you get all your other documents changed. When I looked confused, the attorney explained, like any joint bank accounts, your mortgage, your insurance, car titles, your will, anything like that. While I do that, you need to contact your wife's company to see about any benefits you may be entitled to, as well as to claim any personal belongings. I shook my head in weariness. In my grief, I hadn't stopped to think just how complicated it would be to untangle the life Rachel and I had shared. Now I faced another chore that I dreaded, calling on the widow of Mark Price, the financial executive who had been on the plane with Rachel. ID met Diane only a couple of times at company functions, but ID taken an immediate dislike to her husband. In my eyes, he was one of those egotistical types who thought he was smarter than everyone else. In the brief time I spent with him, he managed to drop enough names and boast about his accomplishments enough to leave a bad taste in my mouth. But that wasn't his widow's fault, I reminded myself, and I felt I had a duty to call on her. I phoned ahead, so Diane was expecting me. As we exchanged condolences, I realized she was probably the only one who truly knew how I was feeling. When we were seated in her living room, she asked kindly, "So, how are you doing now, James?" "It's hard, Diane. It's really hard. I just can't accept that she's really gone. So many things keep reminding me of her." I shook my head helplessly. You know what's the hardest thing? When I'm out on the street or in a crowd, I keep thinking that I've spotted her. The other day, I must have scared some poor woman half to death when I chased her down because I thought she was Rachel. I looked at the floor, recalling the memory and my emotions when I realized what I was doing. Diane watched me with sympathetic eyes. She knew there weren't any words to help. Finally, I looked up at her and asked, "How about you, Diane? How are you doing?" "It's not easy, James, but I'm going to make it," she told me. "The truth is, I'm probably doing much better than you. Greg and I didn't have any children, so I don't have two to console the way you do. Also," she hesitated, "and I wouldn't tell this to anyone else, Greg and I weren't getting along very well before all this happened. ID caught him having a couple of flings in the past, and I think he was in the middle of another affair. If this hadn't happened, we'd probably be headed for divorce before too long." "I'm so sorry to hear that, Diane," I told her sympathetically. "I can only imagine the conflicting emotions you must be feeling." "Yes," she agreed. "One moment I'm relieved that I don't have to deal with his cheating anymore, and the next, I'm filled with guilt because I don't feel sadder. And despite everything, there's a part of me that still misses him." "Are you going to be okay financially?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The good news is that the company provided life insurance on Greg, and because he died while on business, With the double indemnity clause, they'll receive twice the face value. The bad news is I'm going to need every penny of that money because I've learned Greg made a series of bad investments in the futures market and severely depleted our net worth. What Diane said about her late husband did not surprise me. It took no stretch of the imagination to believe that an egotist like Mark Price would not prove a faithful husband. For that matter, the idea that Collins would fancy himself a wheeler dealer in the market was entirely in keeping with my mental picture of the man. What grabbed my attention was Diane's mention of the company-paid life insurance. I remembered my attorney's advice and made a mental note to contact the benefits department of Rachel's company right away. If Collins had been covered, surely Rachel would have had a similar policy, and until I could find a job, those funds might come in very handy. After chatting a few minutes longer, I arose from the couch. Diane, please forgive me, but I'm going to have to cut my visit short. Ethan and Emily will be getting out of school soon, and I've got to go pick them up. But please stay in touch, and if there's anything I can do to help, even if you just need a sympathetic ear to bend, please don't hesitate to call me. When I drove up to our home after picking up Ethan and Emily, I was surprised to see a car parked out front. I got my children into the house through the garage, and a minute later, the doorbell rang. Outside were a man who looked to be in his 50s and a younger woman, both dressed in business attire. I'm Special Agent David Lawson, the man introduced himself, and this is Special Agent Jessica Young. We're with the California Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to come in and ask you a few questions in conjunction with your wife's disappearance. When she realized they were law enforcement officers, Emily wrapped her arms around my waist and buried her face in my side. I could feel her tears dampening my shirt, and I held her tightly. What's this about? I demanded angrily. Before the first agent could speak, Agent Reed interceded. I'm so sorry we've upset your daughter, Mr. Walker. All we're trying to do is complete a routine check in connection with your petition for a death certificate for Mrs. Walker. If you'd like us to come back later, we'll try to do so at a time that would be better for you. I ignored her and turned to face my daughter. It's all right, honey. Nothing bad has happened. The female agent bent down on one knee, reached into her purse, pulled out a tissue, and handed it to Emily. Here, honey, she said in a gentle voice. Emily hesitated, then shyly accepted the tissue, wiping her eyes and blowing her nose. When I saw that my daughter had calmed down, I put my arm around her and spoke to her. These people need to talk with me a while about your mom, Emily. Why don't you go get started on your homework? They'll be right out here in the living room if you need me. With that, I gently pushed my daughter toward her room. Then I turned to face the officers. If it won't take too long, let's go ahead and get this over with. The three of us stepped into the living room and seated ourselves around a coffee table. We just need to get a little background information on your wife. Mr. Walker, the male agent began. How long were the two of you married? We got married in 2001, right after we both graduated from University of California, I replied, thinking back to the beautiful brunette co-ed I had wooed and won so many years ago. And she was employed by International Sales Corporation up until her disappearance? That's right, I confirmed. She was regional manager for the northeastern U.S. If her region was the Northeast, why would she have been traveling to the Jamaica? The younger woman asked. At ISC, I explained, the Northeast included the Jamaica as well as the U.S. Their Caribbean headquarters are in Kingston, so it wasn't uncommon for Rachel to fly down there. Rachel? The woman asked. I felt my voice grow husky. Rachel was my pet name for her. Agent Reed reached across and patted my hand sympathetically. That's all right, Mr. Walker. I know this is hard for you. The older agent decided to change the line of questioning. Was it normal for your wife to fly her own plane on business trips? Yes, I replied. Rachel's dad was a pilot, and she got her license as soon as she was old enough. She took every opportunity to fly herself because she said it made her independent of commercial airline schedules. She used to say she could get where she needed to be, complete her business, and be back home while the competition was still stuck in the terminal. She felt like it gave her an edge, especially when she was starting out. The two agents made notes. Then Agent Reed looked up at me. And what about you, Mr. Walker? What do you do? I managed to smile. I'm a stay-at-home father. Seeing their looks, I went on. I was an aerospace engineer up until 2 years ago when my company cut back, and I was laid off. The only prospects I could find for a new job would have required me to relocate out of state. But in the meantime, Rachel's job was going great. She'd gotten a couple of major promotions and was earning a great salary, plus big bonuses. It didn't make sense for her to quit, so we agreed that I'd manage the household and take care of the kids while she worked. And how did this change affect your relationship with Mrs. Walker? Agent Blake asked. Why is that relevant? I asked irritably. Please bear with us, Mr. Walker, the younger woman interceded. We are required to check to see if there could be any factors that might have played a role in your wife's disappearance. It's all routine. Somewhat mollified, I looked at the two of them. Of course, it was a big change for me, but I'm an engineer. I'm trained to measure and assess all the factors in a design. It was easy to see that my changing roles was the right thing for our family at that time. It made it possible for Rachel to devote herself to her career, and I made sure that Ethan and Emily always had a parent there for them at all times. Neither of the agents said anything, and I felt as though the question was still hanging in the air. I don't mean it was easy, I went on. She was always calling on customers or attending meetings at corporate, so I didn't see as much of her as I would have liked. Sometimes it felt like her job came first. I suddenly realized what I was saying and added swiftly, but that's pretty much par for the course in corporate life. Besides, it worked out well. I caught myself. Until now. Just 2 more questions, Mr. Walker, Agent Blake said, writing on his pad. Did you notice any changes in your wife's behavior in the time prior to her disappearance? Not really, I replied after a moment's thought. I know she was under a lot of pressure in the last year or so, and her travel schedule was heavier than ever. But Rachel said she was in line for a major promotion. When she got it, she promised the new job would cut down on her travel as well as come with a high-level title and a big bump in her salary. Last question, Agent Blake said, writing on his pad. Are you aware of any changes in your finances that your wife might have made in the last few months? No, I replied with certainty. I keep up with all our finances, and I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary. The young woman glanced at her partner. I think we've taken enough of your time, Mr. Walker. We should be able to wrap all this up pretty quickly, and we'll let you know as soon as we've concluded. In the meantime, if you think of anything you feel we should know, please call me at this number. As she spoke, she handed me her card, and the 2 agents headed for the door. I headed back to my kids' rooms to make sure they were getting their homework done. Both looked busy when I peeked in. They're strong kids, I thought. They've been through hell, and they're holding up well, all things considered. The next day, I drove to ISC headquarters to pay a visit to the benefits department. The head of the department met me and, after expressing her condolences, handed over a box filled with Rachel's personal effects from her office. I had to swallow hard when I saw the framed family portrait she had kept on her desk. The director then turned me over to a specialist to advise me on Rachel's benefits. The first order of business was to look at Rachel's 401k account. I had regularly seen her annual statements, so I wasn't expecting any surprises. When I saw the final total, however, it was quite a bit higher than I had expected. Apparently, during the last year, Rachel had upped her contributions to the plan, putting in more than the company would match. She was really trying to provide for her family, the specialist commented with admiration. The specialist went on to advise me to withdraw the funds as soon as possible and roll them over into my own IRA so that I could more easily manage the funds. The other surprise I got was the sheet I received outlining the life insurance benefit I would receive as Rachel's beneficiary. I learned that Rachel had opted for the maximum amount of insurance for which she was eligible. With the accidental death multiplier, I was amazed to realize that I would receive almost 4 years' worth of Rachel's income. The insurance company will pay that out in annual installments, the woman explained. Otherwise, the taxes would eat you alive. Payment of all of the benefits, of course, was contingent on the companies receiving a copy of Rachel's death certificate. But after the visit from the 2 GBI agents, I felt confident that would be forthcoming soon. I left the office building much relieved. I had thought I would have to begin an immediate search for another job. Now I realized I had a significant grace period to get my life together. Thank you, Rachel, I whispered fervently. I was making dinner for the family late one afternoon several days later when the doorbell rang. When I went to answer, I found Special Agent Reed on my doorstep again. After ID asked her in, she explained the purpose of her visit. Mr. Walker, I wanted to let you know in person that our investigation has been completed and that your wife's death certificate has been issued. You should receive a copy from the court by certified mail in the next few days." I heaved a sigh of relief. I had believed there would be no problems, but it was a relief to know this important task had been accomplished. Just then, a panicked scream came from the back of the house, and I was horrified to hear Emily's voice yelling, "Help me, Daddy, help me." I turned and sprinted for Emily's room. Jessica Young was right on my heels, her hand reaching for the service revolver in the shoulder holster under her jacket. When I burst into Emily's room, I found my daughter staring at a large red bloodstain on her jeans. "I'm bleeding, Daddy," she wailed. I was terrified. "What happened, Emily? Did you cut yourself?" As I started for her side, a hand caught my elbow and pulled me back with surprising strength. "Let me handle this," Olivia said firmly and pushed me toward the door. But I protested, but the young woman would not be moved. "I'll handle this, James. Just go out in the living room and wait." Something about the authority in her voice made me pause, and with the determined young woman blocking my way, I tentatively stepped back into the hallway. Olivia calmly closed the door in my face. After 15 anxious minutes, the door opened and Olivia came out. Before I could ask a question, she grasped my arm. "Emily is fine. You need to go to the store right now and buy a package of sanitary napkins. Get the smallest size they have." But Emily, Ethan and I began to protest. "We'll take care of Emily and let Ethan know what's happening. You just need to go to the store and get back here as fast as you can," she said. As I drove to a nearby convenience store, the realization hit me, and I began to berate myself. "She started having her menstrual period, you idiot. You should have realized that immediately." On the return trip, I continued to curse myself for never talking to my daughter about the maturation into womanhood. "Oh, Rachel, I need you more than ever," I thought in self-pity. When I got home, Olivia met me at the front door and snatched the bag away from me. After looking at the package, she smiled. "You did good, Dad." Then she disappeared back into Emily's room. After 30 more minutes, Olivia reappeared with her arm around Emily, who hung back somewhat shyly. I fell to my knees and hugged my daughter when she came to me. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have talked with you about this a long time ago. I just didn't think about it." "It's okay, Daddy," Emily spoke up. "I just didn't know what was happening, and I was scared." Olivia explained it all to me. "I know what to do now." As she spoke, she slipped her hand into Olivia's, and I realized my daughter had made a new friend. I stood and turned to Olivia. "Thank you so much. It's a good thing you were here. I guess I panicked for a moment. I'm afraid I'm not so good with girls." Olivia smiled, but before she could speak, Ethan popped around the corner. "Just because my dumb little sister has her first period, does that mean we're not going to have any dinner tonight? I'm starving." "Ethan," Emily shrieked, but I grabbed her before she could attack her big brother. "Ethan, if you talk like that to your sister again, I guarantee you'll be going to bed hungry," I warned my son. But before my threat could sound too ominous, I went on, "Now go wash your hands and set the table." Then I turned back to Olivia. "The least we can do is offer you a meal for all you've done. It isn't exactly gourmet cooking, but there's plenty to eat." The young woman was clearly embarrassed. "Thank you, but I can't intrude." Her protestations were halted, however, when Emily tugged on her hand. "Please, Olivia, please stay and eat with us." Gazing at her new friend, Olivia smiled and said, "All right, Emily, just for you." Looking up at me, she smiled again. "Thank you. I'd love to have dinner with your family." The four of us sat down to eat, and Olivia found herself the target of numerous questions from the two kids about her experiences in law enforcement. I ate and listened, both in amusement at my children's curiosity and in admiration at the easy way Olivia handled their questions. I suddenly realized that this was the first time the two of them had really seemed to come out of the shell of their sorrow. When dessert was over, I shooed Ethan and Emily off to do their homework, then offered Olivia a cup of coffee. As the two of us sat at the table, I got a chance to ask my own questions. "You certainly seem to be comfortable with Ethan and Emily. Do you work a lot with young people?" She smiled. "Actually, I come from a big family, 2 brothers and 3 sisters. I was the oldest, so I guess I was second mom to the rest of them." She paused to take a sip of her coffee, then went on. That's why I knew what to do with Emily this afternoon. I got to walk each of my sisters through the trauma of puberty. She looked at me and smiled again. For what it's worth, my dad was just as helpless as you were today. I grinned sheepishly. Well, all I can say is I'm glad you happened to be here. Even when I finally realized what was going on, I still wouldn't have known how to get Emily calmed down so quickly. She smiled to acknowledge my thanks, then her expression grew more serious. How are they coping with the loss of their mother? She asked. I sighed. About as well as can be expected, I think. Emily has been very clingy. I think she's really missing the female influence. As for Ethan, it's hard to tell. He's been sullen and somewhat withdrawn, but I don't know whether that's the result of Rachel's death or just the fact that he's a teenager now. Olivia looked at me sympathetically. From what I've seen, I think you're doing a great job with them. It's just going to take time for them and for you. With that, she stood and said, I really enjoyed the meal, James, but I've intruded on your family far too long. I need to get going, but if it's all right, I'd like to say goodbye to Ethan and Emily. When I nodded, she walked down the hall, and I heard her say goodbye to Ethan. Then she spent a few minutes in Emily's room, and when she returned, Emily came with her, her arm around Olivia's waist. She really has made a new friend, I thought in wonder. A couple of days later, a package arrived in the mail for Emily. When my excited daughter tore open the wrapping, she found a pink stuffed elephant along with a note from Olivia. I was gratified by the thoughtfulness, but amused by the selection. Emily's too old for stuffed animals, I thought, but I was surprised to see the toy given a prominent place on Emily's bed. I guess there's still some little girl left in her yet, I conceded. I called Olivia's office the next day to thank her. I would never have thought of that, I admitted, but somehow it was just the right thing for Emily. Olivia was delighted that my daughter was pleased with her gift and made me promise to keep in touch and let her know how Emily and Ethan were doing. A couple of weeks later, I was paying bills one morning when I got a call from Ethan's homeroom teacher. I'd like to meet with you to talk about your son, the teacher told me. He's having some discipline problems in school. I agreed to meet with her the next day, but I decided not to say anything to Ethan that night. I wanted to wait until I learned what was happening before confronting my son. The meeting was set for the following day after class. While the kids were at PE, Mrs. Walsh, the homeroom teacher, told me that Ethan's behavior in class had grown worse over the last few months. I didn't want to say anything at first because I know he's been through so much, the teacher explained, but it seems to be getting worse. He's become increasingly disengaged from his classes. He's not doing his homework, and his other teachers tell me he's not paying attention in their classes. He's always done so well up to now, but his grades are really going to plummet this semester if he doesn't do something to turn things around. I was troubled. How much do you think being a teenager has to do with this, Mrs. Walsh? There's no question that's a tough age for kids, especially boys, she told me. But we're used to that. I think his mother's death is affecting him more than he may have let on to you. You may want to consider getting counseling for him. I thanked the woman and returned to my car to wait uneasily for my kids to finish their gym classes. I was upset to learn about the problems Ethan was having and was determined to have a long talk with the boy. When I got Ethan and Emily home, I sent Emily to her room to get started on her homework, then led Ethan into the master bedroom. The boy's face darkened. He knew he was in trouble. I recounted my visit with Ethan's homeroom teacher and cited some of the examples she had given me. What's going on, Ethan? Why are you acting this way? I demanded. No reason, the boy replied sullenly. Come on, you're smarter than that, I shot back. Don't you care about your grades? Not really, Ethan mumbled. I was frustrated by my son's unresponsiveness, and in anger, I tried to shame him into a reaction. What would your mother think if she knew you were screwing up? Who cares? Ethan shouted back angrily. She was such a witch. In shock and anger, I grabbed my son and yelled at him. Don't you ever speak of your mother that way? How can you say such a thing? In fear at my rage and pain at my strong grip, the boy blurted out, I saw her. I saw her screwing that man. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, he slumped to the bed and began to sob. In astonishment, I sat down beside him, put my arm around him, and held him as though he were a small child. It's all right, I kept repeating, trying to calm his obvious anguish. When Ethan's crying had subsided, I lifted his head. It's all right, Ethan. "I'm not mad at you. Just tell me what you saw." His son looked at him tearfully. "It was last fall. You let me ride my bike to school one day, but I forgot my math homework, so I sneaked out at lunch to come home and get it. While I was looking for it in my room, I heard Mom come in. I didn't want her to catch me, so I hid. That's when I heard the man's voice." "What man?" I asked a little too quickly. "I don't know," Ethan said. "Some guy I never saw before." "That's okay," I soothed him. "Just tell me what happened next." "They came in here, and then it got quiet, so I thought I could sneak out. But then I heard Mom make a funny sound, and I was scared, and I looked in, and they were on the bed, and they were screwing." The words poured out of his mouth faster and faster as though he was desperate to spit them out. When he finished, he began to cry again. "Why did she do that, Dad? How could Mom act like such a witch?" As I listened to my son's story, I felt myself go numb, but I had no time to deal with my own emotions. My son needed me. "I understand, Ethan. It's okay. I'm sorry you had to see that, but I'm glad you told me." I took my son gently by the shoulders and turned him around to face me. "Sometimes people we love make mistakes or do something we don't like. That doesn't mean we don't love them anymore, it just means we don't like what they did. I don't know why your mother would do that, son, but I know she loved you and Emily very much. It's the good things she did that I want you to remember about her." I held my son and continued to talk to him for a while longer. When I felt that the boy had calmed down sufficiently, I gently urged him to start on his homework while I went off to the kitchen to get dinner started. Before Ethan left, I enjoined him to say nothing to Emily. The boy promised, and I felt fairly comfortable that he would keep the disturbing news from his sister. The rest of the evening passed without further incident, but once the kids were in bed, my emotions began to erupt. My first reaction was to deny what Ethan had told me. My son had to be mistaken or have misinterpreted what he saw. But I couldn't maintain that rationalization very long. My son had been too upset by the experience, and I had to admit a teenager these days would certainly recognize sex when he saw it. With that admission, my thoughts turned bitter. How could Rachel have betrayed me? I had thought we had a good marriage. How could she have been screwing someone on the side? For that matter, who was the other man? And how long had the affair lasted? It's hard enough to lose your wife in a plane crash, I thought in despair. It's worse to learn you lost her long before that. Sleep was slow in coming that night, and the next day, I was in a black mood. It was Tuesday, a day I would normally go to the gym, and after the kids were off to school, I decided to keep the routine. The exercise helped divert my attention, but when I hit the treadmill, my mind returned to Rachel's infidelity. How could Rachel have done that, and in our own bed? I asked. Somehow the location made the betrayal even worse. For that matter, how could she know I wouldn't be home? The answer hit me immediately. It must have been one of the days when I went to the gym. I'm such a creature of habit, she would have been pretty certain the house would be empty. But the answer to that question immediately raised others. If she planned her little assignation to fit my schedule, that doesn't sound like it was a spuro-fement thing. How often did she meet him there? It couldn't have been every week her travel schedule would have interfered. Every question seemed to raise another, each only adding to my anguish. I did my best to act normally around Ethan and Emily, but over the next few days, I continued to suffer. I found myself making a trip to the drugstore to buy antacids. ID never had stomach problems before. Compounding my misery was the lack of anyone to talk to about my discovery. I certainly didn't want to involve my parents or Rachel's. I knew the news would be devastating to them. Likewise, I didn't want to talk to my friends and risk becoming the subject of gossip in the neighborhood. And, I thought, I certainly don't want to risk having any of his schoolmates teasing Ethan or Emily. I felt trapped. I was working at my desk one evening when I noticed Jessica Young's card. She told me to call her if I had any additional information, I remembered. But in truth, I was desperate for any excuse to share my news with someone and get another perspective. I called the cell phone number she had handwritten on the card, and when I identified myself, Olivia seemed pleased to hear from me. But her tone changed to one of concern when I told her I needed to talk with her. "Are Emily and Ethan okay?" she asked anxiously. "They are, but I'm not," I replied. "Could you possibly have lunch with me tomorrow? This isn't the kind of thing I want to discuss over the phone." She quickly agreed and suggested a place near the NJBI offices where she worked. It's a quiet little place. We should be able to talk, she assured me. When I hung up, I found myself feeling a bit better at the prospect of unburdening myself. Olivia was waiting in the restaurant when I came through the door. She smiled in greeting, but her smile quickly disappeared when she saw the pained expression on my face. After we were seated and had placed our orders, she could stand the suspense no longer. For heaven's sake, James, what's happened? You told me to let you know if I had any more information about my wife, I said. Well, I don't know if this is relevant to your investigation, but I just found out that Rachel was cheating on me. As I said that, I was ashamed to feel tears flood my eyes and run down my cheeks. Olivia reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Oh, James, that's horrible. Tell me what happened. The whole story of the meeting with Ethan's teacher, the confrontation with my son, and Ethan's anguished revelation came spilling out, interrupted only by the arrival of our food. Olivia listened quietly, letting me tell the story at my own pace. Only when ID reached the end did she speak. Poor Ethan, she said. It's no surprise he's been acting out in school. This must have been eating away at him ever since it happened. And then, with her death, it's no wonder he's been so conflicted. She released my hands when the waitress had brought our order, but now she leaned across the table to reach for me again. I can hardly imagine what this has done to you, James, she said quietly, and I could see the sympathy in her eyes. Was there any indication that something was wrong? Now that you look back, did you see any clue? No, I said. I can't say I saw anything. You know what they say, the husband is always the last to know. I looked down at my untouched plate for a second, then back up at the woman. Ever since she got her big promotion, our sex life had fallen off pretty sharply. But between the pressures of her new role and her travel schedule, I figured it was understandable. I didn't like it, but I felt like I had to accept it for our family's sake. She kept telling me things would get better once she moved up to the national level. But, I paused. I guess that wasn't a bee. Then I scowled. What's killing me is I don't have any answers. I don't know who the bastard she was sleeping with was. I don't know when their affair started or how long it had been going on. I don't know if she was in love with the guy or if she was planning to leave me. Worst of all, I don't know why she would do that to me and the kids. Olivia squeezed my hands. James, please listen to me. The truth is that you're not likely to ever get the answers to your questions. You're going to have to let all that go. With her death, none of that matters anymore. All you can do is focus on taking care of your family and yourself. I know you're right, I said, but it just hurts so bad to be betrayed that way. It makes me wonder when she stopped loving me. No, Olivia said fiercely. You're wrong. Whatever else may have happened, it's clear that Rachel still cared deeply about you and the kids. Look what you found out at ISC. She bought the maximum life insurance to make sure you all were protected. She maxed out her contributions to the 401k, planned to put money away for your future. I don't know what else happened in her life, but those sure look like caring acts to me. Thanks, Olivia. I'll try to remember that. As we stood to leave, I looked down at the table. Neither of us had touched our food. I guess I'm not a very good lunch date, I said wryly. Don't worry about that, she replied lightly. Missing a meal or two is probably a good thing for me. I looked down at her slim shape. It sure looks good to me, I thought. Then I was startled to realize I was thinking about her in a sexual way. It's been a long time, I told myself ruefully. As we walked out the door, she took my arm. Please stay in touch, James, and let me know if there's anything I can do. I'd really like to help. Then she reached up and gave me a kiss on the cheek. As she turned away, I thought I saw a hint of a blush on her cheeks. Driving back home, I was surprised to find that my mood had lightened. I guess I really needed to get that off my chest, I told myself. The next Saturday, I had been out in the yard picking up limbs that had fallen during a storm. When I got inside, I saw Emily talking on the telephone. I turned to Ethan, who was standing nearby. Did someone call? I asked. No, Ethan said dismissively. She's just talking to her new BFF, Olivia. I was surprised. Does she call Olivia often? And what's a BFF? Oh, Dad, Ethan replied in exasperation. You're so out of it. BFF is best friend forever. Just then, Emily looked up and saw me. Dad, can we ask Olivia over for dinner? Let me talk to her, I said, extending my hand toward my daughter. When she handed me the phone, I said, Hi, Olivia. I guess you heard that. Would you like to have dinner with Emily tonight? Ethan and I will be here too. I heard her melodic laugh, followed by a quick acceptance. Great, I said. Why don't you get here about 6? After we concluded arrangements, I hung up and turned to my daughter. Well, she's coming, I said. I hope you're happy. Oh yes, Dad. She squealed. Well, in that case, you and Ethan need to start doing some straightening up around here so she doesn't think we live like pigs. Oh, Dad, do I have to? Ethan complained. But before I could reply, the boy turned and started to pick up the clothes Head left in the den. He's still a teenager, I thought, but he seems to be doing better. As I turned to head for the kitchen, I began to consider what dish I could make. Definitely something better than spaghetti and meatballs, I thought, remembering the first time Olivia had eaten with us. I finally decided on a fish dish I considered one of my specialties. I felt confident in my ability to make it, and the kids liked it well enough, which was always a plus. To do that, I knew I'd have to make a trip to the grocery store. Explaining my errand to Ethan and Emily, I enjoined them to stay in the house till I got back. I found a nice piece of salmon in the seafood department and then decided to pick up some dessert from the bakery. I ought to pick up a nice bottle of wine while I'm at it, I thought, and turned my cart down the appropriate aisle. After finding what I wanted, I made a detour to the store's floral department and picked up a bouquet for the table. On my way home, I began to think about what I was doing. I'm really going all out on this meal, I realized in surprise. I finally decided it was because I owed Olivia a good meal. After all, I did ruin her lunch, I told myself. Olivia rang the doorbell promptly at 6, and before I could get to the door, Emily was already showing her in. To my amazement, even Ethan deigned to present himself, and the teenage boy actually made a little polite conversation. For my part, I found myself feeling a bit awkward and inarticulate, but if she noticed, Olivia made no sign. Instead, she chatted happily with Emily and willingly went with her to see something the girl wanted to show her in her room. By the time the two of them reappeared, dinner was almost ready. The meal proved a great success. Olivia was suitably impressed by my cooking skills. Oh, a man who can cook. Mother warned me about men like you, she teased, and was also clearly at ease with my kids, both of whom chattered away to her in response to her questions. When dessert was finished, she insisted on joining in the cleanup, and with her help, the dishes were soon cleared, rinsed, and put in the dishwasher to be run later. At that point, Ethan wandered off to resume a video game he had paused, and Emily wanted to watch a favorite program she had TiVoed. So the two adults refilled their wine glasses and wandered out to the living room. James, everything was wonderful, Olivia complimented me. I don't know when I've had such a good time. Thank you so much for asking me. I think Emily would never have spoken to me again if I hadn't. I laughed, and Olivia joined me. She's a wonderful young lady, and you're lucky to have her, she responded. And her dad does pretty well too. I felt my face flush, but then Olivia's face took on a more serious look. James, in addition to having a lovely time with you, I'm glad you invited me because there's some information I want to share with you. I caught the new tone in her voice and looked at her curiously. This is highly confidential, James, but I feel I know you well enough to trust you, and it concerns you at least indirectly. Now she definitely had my attention. As you know, Olivia began. The NJBI had to make a routine investigation before a death certificate could be issued for your wife. And as you also know, we found nothing to give us any reason not to proceed with the declaration, which was duly issued. She took a deep breath and continued. Naturally, we did the same thing on Mark Price, but there we found a few oddities. For one thing, it appears he was in financial trouble after a series of bad investment decisions. I nodded. What Olivia said mirrored what Diane had told me. Moreover, in the last few weeks, Olivia went on, the security department at ISC let us know that they have uncovered what appear to be significant irregularities in the Northeastern Region Accounting Department, the function that Mark Price headed. Even more disturbing, they believe they've uncovered a fraudulent invoicing scheme that may have embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from ISC, and Mark Price appears to have authorized it. Per Diane, I commented. She didn't deserve this. But then I began to process what Olivia had told me, and new possibilities began to arise. Could Mark Price have had a hand in the crash? I asked. Could it have been a way to cover his tracks? When Olivia said nothing, my imagination went into high gear. What if Rachel found out about Colin's scheme? What if he murdered her to silence her and used the plane crash to hide the evidence? Could he still be alive? Maybe he's tucked away in some villa by the sea, laughing at all of us. Slow down, James, Olivia urged. You're getting carried away. The most likely scenario is still that the plane went down unexpectedly, just like we've thought all along. If Collins was indeed involved in an embezzling scheme, the crash cut short his plans. We'll investigate all the possibilities, but we can't jump to conclusions, and neither should you. But it was hard for me to turn off my imagination. You don't think Rachel could have been in on it, do you? I asked abruptly. Olivia sighed. It's not impossible, she conceded, but we don't think it's likely. In the first place, if she were involved, that would mean she was planning in advance to abandon her family. It's unusual for a mother to abandon her children, especially kids their age, she said, gesturing toward the kids' rooms. Collins, in contrast, had no children, and his wife has indicated that their marriage was on the rocks at the time of his disappearance. Moreover, unlike Collins, Rachel's finances were in good shape, and she did nothing prior to her disappearance that would suggest she was in on any scheme, assuming there was one. In fact, if anything, her actions were just the opposite of someone planning to disappear. But all that is just speculation. The one fact we do have, Olivia went on, is that Rachel's plane did go down at sea. She had hoped to calm me, but as she looked at me, she could see that I was still upset by her revelations. James, you've got to promise me that you won't say anything about all this. It's highly confidential, and if word got out, it could jeopardize our investigation. It could also get me fired. That brought me up short. I realized that Olivia had taken a risk in confiding in me, and I owed her an obligation to keep quiet. I understand, Olivia, and I promise I won't compromise your investigation. But I have to ask, why did you tell me all this? She looked at me seriously. It's highly unlikely, James, but there's always the possibility that you might hear something or find out something that could help us shed light on all this. If you do, James, promise me you'll contact me right away. No Lone Ranger acts, please. I returned her look. I promise, Olivia. Then I smiled. Besides, having to contact you again wouldn't be such a chore. The smile she gave me seemed to brighten the room. Shortly after that, Olivia had to leave. Before doing so, she made a point of saying goodbye to both Ethan and Emily. I noted that Ethan actually paused his game to say goodnight, a real compliment coming from him. Once again, Emily walked her friend to the door, extracting a promise from Olivia to call her. But this time, after Emily had hugged her, Olivia made a point of leaning back inside the door and bestowing a kiss on my cheek. As she walked to her car, Emily looked up at me and said, "She likes you, Daddy." I smiled at my daughter and clasped her to me. Well, I like her too. After everyone had turned in for the night and the house had grown quiet, I lay in my bed chewing over what Olivia had told me and all the various scenarios I had imagined. Oh, Rachel, I thought, what did you get yourself into? Finally, I fell into a restless sleep. It was a week later while I was on my computer when I noticed something unusual. I had been reading about some of my favorite sports teams, and as I got ready to click on my Falcons bookmark, I noticed the Facebook icon just above it. On a whim, I clicked it. I was not a Facebook follower. In truth, I rarely ever visited the site. The only reason I had set up an account was to allow me to keep an eye on my children. Both Ethan and Emily loved the social networking site and used it as another way to stay in touch with their friends. I initially had no objection, but after reading a couple of scary articles about some of the pitfalls, I set up my own account and insisted that Ethan and Emily friend me. I also had them give me their passwords to their pages as well. That way, I reasoned, I could see any messages or pictures they posted as well as anything their friends sent to them. Even more important, I figured, Ethan and Emily would know I could monitor them, and that, I hoped, would encourage them to be prudent. As I logged onto my own page, most of what I saw held little interest for me, but I did notice a friend request from someone I had never heard of, Mark Mason. The name didn't sound familiar, and there was no picture, only a silhouette. When I clicked on the name, the stranger's page blandly informed me that personal information was available only to friends. "Hey, Ethan," I yelled. "Do we know a Mark Mason?" My son walked into the room and saw that I was looking at Facebook. "Oh, that guy. Just ignore him, Dad. He's been bugging me to friend him for weeks now. I just delete his requests. Emily popped into the room just then. Yeah, he's been trying to get me to friend him too. He's just some Facebook creep. That was enough to catch my attention. Some unknown person not only wanted to make contact with me, but also with my children. There were all kinds of scam artists out there, I knew, and a few far worse predators as well. I was alarmed, but I didn't want to frighten my children, so all I said was, "You two did exactly the right thing. Don't ever respond to anyone you don't know well over the internet." Grasping for ways to protect my family, I had a sudden idea. I wonder if Olivia could help us find out who this Mason creep is. I called her at home, and she must have seen my name on caller ID because she answered warmly. "Hi, James." "Hi, Olivia. I'm glad I caught you. Is there any chance you could come over? Something odd has come up, and I'd like to check it out with you if you're free." "It's nothing serious, is it? Ethan and Emily are okay, aren't they?" As I reassured her, I couldn't help but observe that she seemed as concerned about my children as I was. It gave me a warm feeling. She told me she'd been working in the yard, but could be over in 45 minutes. To my surprise, almost exactly to the minute, her car pulled up to the curb. With Rachel, I remembered, you were lucky if she wasn't more than an hour late, trying to make her image perfect. But here was Olivia, right on time, obviously freshly showered and clad in a casual but attractive outfit, with her hair nicely combed and wearing fresh makeup. It was clear that she'd made a special effort even in such a short time. "You look nice, Olivia. You didn't have to get all dressed up for us," I told her. She squeezed my hand. "Thank you, James. I wanted to." Once she was in the house, I called my kids. When they came noisily into the den, I asked them to tell Olivia about their Facebook friend. As the official expert in the family, Ethan seized the opportunity to show off by rapidly logging onto each of the 3 family Facebook accounts in turn and retrieving the friend request from the mysterious Mark Mason. After complimenting Ethan on his skill, Olivia seated herself in front of the screen and called up all the unread and archived messages, but she wasn't able to uncover any additional information. Finally, she looked up at Ethan and Emily. The most likely answer is that this is some kind of marketing ploy. If you had accepted the request, you'd probably be receiving all kinds of ads for junk you don't want or offers for imaginary gold from Nigeria. There are some bad people out there, and you should never give any information about yourself to strangers, okay? The 2 kids nodded solemnly, and I thought to myself that hearing that message from Olivia probably had more impact on them than when I had given it. It had grown dark outside while we'd been working at the computer, and I knew my kids would soon be hungry. "Olivia, we're probably going to go out to get some dinner in a little while. It won't be anything fancy, just a family-style restaurant, but we'd love to have you join us if you can." Immediately, as I had known they would, Emily and even Ethan began to clamor for her to come with us. She laughingly surrendered to the inevitable. The 4 of us piled into my sedan and headed off to a casual place not far from our home. As we drove, Olivia began asking the 2 kids about some of what she'd seen posted on their Facebook pages, and soon Emily and Ethan were eagerly talking about their friends and activities. As I listened to the conversation, I marveled. Olivia probably already knows more about what's going on in Emily's and Ethan's lives than Rachel ever did. I recalled that on the rare occasions before her death when we'd all gone out together, Rachel's conversations revolved mainly around her job. I felt guilty for my disloyalty, but I knew it was true. The lively conversation continued through dinner and the trip back home, and I was pleased when Olivia came in the house with us. The kids promptly plopped themselves in front of the TV and asked Olivia to come watch with them, but she begged off. "I need to talk with your dad a while." She took my hand and led me into the living room. After we were seated, her face grew serious and she said, "I didn't want to alarm Ethan and Emily, but that friend request concerns me." "It's probably nothing," as I said, "but when I combine that with what I told you last week about Mark Price, it worries me." "What are you thinking, Olivia?" I asked. She hesitated, then spoke. "We don't have any evidence of anything specific, but I've been trained to always consider worst-case scenarios." "It's possiblino. It's highly unlikely," she corrected herself. "But there is a slim possibility that Mark Mason is someone interested in getting access to you or to the kids to pump you for information or even worse." "You mean someone who might be involved in Greg's scheme, or whatever it was?" "Yes, she replied, but it's not only that. There might be people out there who think you know more about Rachel's disappearance than you've revealed. I know you're not hiding anything, but other people could come to the wrong conclusion, especially if they think you're lying to protect the kids. And do you think that's what happened? You think Rachel was murdered? She took my hands in hers and looked at me. I don't know, James. I really don't know. We don't have any proof one way or the other. I only hope it's all some crazy theory. But I'm worried, and for that reason, I think we need to be very cautious. You think we need to talk to the NJBI, or maybe the cops? I asked her. No, James. I'm the best person to handle this for now. I can get all the resources of the Bureau involved without risking a panic. They'll talk to my superiors tomorrow and get back to you with anything they find. Her words were comforting. Thanks, Olivia. I do appreciate it. She smiled at me, and then she reached over and gave me a hug. I held her tight, grateful for her kindness. She'd done more to help me over the last few weeks than I could ever express. Before she left, Olivia took the kids aside one at a time and impressed on them the importance of not friending anyone they didn't know well. Both agreed eagerly, and I realized that she was right. Hearing that message from someone in law enforcement made a lot more sense to them than hearing it from Dad. I turned to Olivia as she reached the front door. Thanks again for all you're doing for me and the kids, I said. They'll keep everything you said in mind. She took my hand. I'm sure you will. But I still want you to promise me that if anything else happens, or if you get worried about anything, you'll let me know immediately. Okay. Of course, I agreed. She kissed me on the cheek before stepping out into the night. I watched her get into her car and waited until she was safely on her way. Only then did I close the door and turn back to my kids. Time for bed. You too, I ordered. When I retired, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. I was grateful for Olivia's visit and pleased with her obvious affection for my children, but I still couldn't keep my mind from returning to the alarming possibility that she had raised. The prospect that the Facebook request was just the opening move of some kind of larger plot wouldn't leave my mind. I resolved to take additional steps to protect my family and vowed to keep my children close. The next day, I found myself almost on edge, expecting some strange event to occur. But nothing happened. The sun was shining brightly, the birds were singing, and it was as though the entire neighborhood was celebrating the new day. Maybe Olivia was right, I thought. Maybe I was overreacting. That evening, I began to feel foolish. After supper, I found myself feeling a little antsy, so I decided to head for the gym. Since the kids were old enough to be left alone for a little while, I got ready to go. Before I left, I called out to them, "Hey, I'm going to the gym for an hour or so. Don't open the door to anyone unless it's Olivia, and if you need me, you know where to reach me." Then I left, whistling to myself. When I returned, the door was ajar. That brought me up short. I remembered clearly locking it on the way out. For the first time since Rachel's death, I felt a real surge of alarm. I dashed into the house, calling out for my kids. As I moved from room to room, my fear grew. When I finally found Ethan, he was lying on the floor of the den, motionless. "Oh God," I cried out, but as I bent over him, I could see his chest moving up and down. In relief, I realized he was unconscious but still alive. "Ethan, can you hear me?" I called out urgently. He didn't respond. At that moment, I felt a rush of air from behind me. Turning around quickly, I saw a man coming at me with something in his hand. I barely had time to register that he was wearing a ski mask when he hit me with a blow to the side of my head. I saw stars and crumpled to the ground. My last thoughts as I blacked out were of Ethan and Emily. The next thing I remember was waking up to find myself sitting in a chair, tied tightly with ropes. My head was throbbing, and I had trouble focusing. Then a voice came from across the room. "Welcome back, Mr. Walker," the voice said with a smirk. The man stepped out of the shadows, and I saw that he was still wearing the ski mask. "I was wondering if you were going to wake up before we had to leave." I struggled against the ropes, but they were tight and unyielding. "What do you want?" I demanded. The man laughed. "What do I want? I want you to listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. You're going to do exactly as I say, or your children are going to suffer. Do you understand?" A chill ran down my spine. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're going to help me get something I need. Something that your wife had, the man said. My wife? Rachel? She's dead, I said, confusion swirling in my mind. That's right, the man said. But before she died, she got hold of something very valuable, and you're going to help me find it. If you don't, well, let's just say that Ethan and Emily will pay the price. My heart pounded in my chest. I don't know what you're talking about, I said desperately. The man sighed in exasperation. I was hoping you wouldn't be this difficult, James. You see, I don't have time to play games. If you don't tell me where the files are, I'm going to hurt your kids. And believe me, I know how to make them suffer. I felt a surge of anger. You're not going to touch my children, I said, my voice low and dangerous. The man laughed again. We'll see about that, he said. But first, let's see if we can jog your memory. He stepped closer to me and pulled out a knife from his pocket. The blade gleamed in the dim light of the room. Now, let's see if we can get you to cooperate. I tried to struggle against the ropes, but it was no use. The man grabbed my arm and pressed the knife against my skin. Where are the files, James? He asked again, his voice cold. I don't know, I shouted, panic rising in my chest. The man shook his head in disappointment. That's too bad, he said. I was hoping you wouldn't make this difficult. He pressed the knife harder against my skin, and I felt a sharp pain as the blade cut into my flesh. I gritted my teeth and tried to hold back a scream. The man smiled. You see, James, I'm not a patient man. I want those files, and I want them now. I told you, I don't know what you're talking about. I shouted, my voice filled with desperation. The man sighed again. I guess we're going to have to do this the hard way. Then, he pulled out a phone from his pocket and dialed a number. After a few moments, he spoke into the phone. Bring the girl in. My heart sank as I realized what he meant. No, please, leave my daughter out of this, I pleaded. The man ignored me and hung up the phone. A few moments later, I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. A man entered the room, dragging a struggling Emily behind him. Daddy, she cried out when she saw me. Let her go, I shouted, trying to free myself from the ropes. The man with the ski mask smiled. You see, James, I wasn't bluffing. Now, are you going to tell me where the files are, or do I have to hurt her? I felt tears streaming down my face. Please, don't hurt her. I don't know where the files are. I swear. The man stared at me for a long moment, then he nodded to the other man. Take her to the back room and keep her there until I say otherwise. The man grabbed Emily and started to drag her away. No, Daddy, please help me, she screamed. My heart shattered as I watched her being taken away. They'll do whatever you want, I whispered, my voice broken. Just don't hurt her. The man with the ski mask nodded. Good. Now, let's talk about those files. The man with the ski mask leaned in closer, his cold eyes locked on mine. You know, James, I've done my research on you. I know you're not just some average guy. I know you were an aerospace engineer, someone who could solve problems under pressure. So, I'm giving you a chance to solve this problem and save your daughter. Think hard. Where would Rachel keep something valuable? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of fear and anger swirling inside me. My mind raced, recalling every conversation, every detail of Rachel's life in the past year. She had been secretive at times, but ID chalked it up to stress from work. Now, I had to sift through those memories for anything that might point to where she could have hidden these so-called files. I need more information, I said, my voice steadying. What exactly am I looking for? The man smirked. Nice try, but I'm not giving you any more details. You're smart. Figure it out. I nodded, trying to appear cooperative while my mind worked on a plan. I had to buy time, but more importantly, I had to find a way to get Emily out of danger. As the man stood back, watching me intently, I recalled a strange conversation Rachel and I had a few months before her disappearance. She'd been unusually guarded when I asked about a locked drawer in her home office, one she never allowed anyone to access. I hadn't pressed the issue, respecting her privacy, but now I realized that might be where she kept whatever these men were after. It might be in her office, I said, trying to sound uncertain. There's a locked drawer she never let me open. The man tilted his head, considering my words. Where's the key? I don't know, I replied honestly. She never told me. He turned to his accomplice. Search the office. Find that key. The other man nodded and left the room, leaving me alone with the man in the ski mask. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, the seconds ticking by as I waited, hoping desperately for some kind of miracle. After what felt like an eternity, the other man returned, holding a small silver key. "Found it," he said, tossing it to the man in charge. "Good," the leader said, his tone satisfied. "Now, let's see what secrets Rachel was keeping from you, James." He cut the ropes binding my hands, and I winced as blood rushed back into my arms. "Get up," he ordered, gesturing with the knife. "You're coming with us." I stumbled to my feet, trying to stay calm as he pushed me toward Rachel's office. My mind was racing with possibilities. I needed to find a way to turn this situation to my advantage. We reached the office, and the man with the ski mask wasted no time unlocking the drawer. Inside, there were several files and a small, black USB drive. He grabbed everything, stuffing the papers into a bag and holding up the USB drive with a triumphant grin. "This is it," he said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "This is what we came for." I had no idea what was on that drive, but I knew it was important enough to risk everything. "You've got what you want. Now let Emily go," I demanded, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. The man laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "Oh, we're not done yet. You see, James, I can't have you running to the authorities as soon as we walk out of here. We need a little insurance." "What kind of insurance?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Bring the boy." My heart dropped. They were going to take Ethan as well. I had to act now. Desperation gave me the strength to think clearly. I noticed a heavy paperweight on Rachel's desk, just within arm's reach. Without giving it another thought, I lunged for it and swung it at the man's head with all the force I could muster. The man stumbled back, stunned, and dropped the knife. I grabbed it, adrenaline surging through me as I stood between him and the door. "You're not taking my kids," I said, my voice filled with a newfound determination. The man recovered quickly, glaring at me with a mixture of rage and surprise. "You're making a big mistake, James." "I've already made too many," I replied. "Now, let's end this." The man charged at me, but I was ready. I sidestepped him, using his momentum against him, and he crashed into the wall. I didn't hesitate. I struck him again, this time with the hilt of the knife, knocking him out cold. Breathing heavily, I looked down at the unconscious man, my mind racing. I needed to act fast. I quickly grabbed the USB drive and the files, stuffing them into my pockets. Then I ran out of the office, heading for the back room where they had taken Emily. As I burst into the room, I saw Emily tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. The other man was standing guard, but he was caught off guard by my sudden entrance. Before he could react, I tackled him, knocking him to the ground. I managed to subdue him, tying him up with the same ropes they had used on Emily. I rushed to Emily's side, cutting the ropes that bound her. She threw her arms around me, sobbing. "Daddy, I was so scared." "I know, sweetheart," I said, holding her close. "But it's over now. You're safe." I knew I had to find Ethan. Leaving the tied-up man under Emily's watchful eye, I ran through the house, calling for my son. I found him in the den, just starting to regain consciousness. He groaned and sat up, rubbing his head. "Dad, what happened?" he asked, his voice groggy. "It's a long story," I said, pulling him into a hug. "But we're going to be okay. Come on, we need to get out of here." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as we hurried back to Emily. I gave the operator a quick rundown of the situation, and within minutes, sirens filled the air. The police arrived, and I handed over the unconscious men to them, along with the USB drive and the files. As the officers took our statements, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over. The police assured me that the men would be thoroughly investigated, and the USB drive would be analyzed to uncover whatever secrets Rachel had been hiding. In the days that followed, things slowly began to return to normal. The police investigation revealed that the men were part of a larger criminal network, involved in corporate espionage and embezzlement. Rachel had apparently stumbled upon their illegal activities and had secretly gathered evidence against them. The files and the USB drive contained enough information to bring down the entire operation. Rachel's company was deeply grateful for the information I provided. They offered me a significant reward, which I accepted on behalf of my children's future. The funds ensured that Ethan and Emily would have everything they needed, from college to a comfortable life. As for me, I finally felt a sense of closure. Rachel's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but I realized that she had tried to protect us in her own way. She hadn't intended for any of this to happen, and in the end, she had paid the ultimate price for trying to do the right thing. I made a decision to focus on the future, to be the best father I could be for Ethan and Emily. I also decided to sell the house and move to a new city, where we could start fresh, away from the painful memories. The kids agreed, and soon we found ourselves in a new home, ready to begin a new chapter in our lives. Olivia kept in touch, and over time, our bond grew stronger. She had been a constant source of support through the darkest days, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations, our dinners together, and the way she made the kids laugh. It wasn't long before we became more than just friends. Olivia became a part of our family, bringing joy and stability back into our lives. In the end, we all found our way to happiness again. Ethan and Emily thrived in their new schools, making new friends and excelling in their studies. As for me, I rediscovered a sense of purpose in my life. I started a small business, using the skills I'd honed as an engineer, and it grew steadily, providing for us all. One evening, as I sat on the porch of our new home, watching Ethan and Emily play in the yard with Olivia, I felt a deep sense of peace. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by the warmth of love and the promise of a bright future. Rachel's memory would always be with us, but I knew that we had moved beyond the shadows of that dark time. I had lost much, but I had gained even more. And as I looked at the woman who had brought light back into our lives, I knew that everything was going to be okay. We were finally home. Thank you for joining us today. What an intense story of loss, resilience, and new beginnings. If you were in Jameis' shoes, how do you think you'd have handled the situation with the masked man? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time,